I had an honest chat with the indie legend Fredrik Präntare about how he sold hundreds of thousands of copies of his indie game Core Keeper, all while starting game dev knowing nothing about the craft. If you want to build a game studio and you want to make your own indie games full-time, this conversation is especially for you. We discuss how he went from a small team of just 2 game devs to building a large team of 40 passionate developers. We discuss why he prefers working with a team over being solo, how staying confident despite the high highs and low lows of game dev is especially important for you. We discuss whether you should go to game dev school and how to pay for a project before it's finished. And finally, he shows me how Core Keeper actually works, especially its impressive custom lighting system. And by the way, look, this project Core Keeper is insanely complex. And I'm sure the projects that you're creating feel complex as well. And I can't think of a better way to help simplify this than Bezi. They have just launched the beta of their new feature, Agent Mode, which lets you create and modified code directly in your project at your approval. You can now update and iterate everything from within the Bezi app, and it makes it very easy to pinpoint and validate all the suggested changes in the context of the code. Bezi also keeps track of all the changes you make, so it's easy to revert at any time. Bezi can be considered your development assistant, as it has a full context of your entire project and is great for answering questions, writing code, or giving you a deep understanding of your projects, which especially can be helpful when onboarding new people. Bezi automatically searches all your assets, scripts, scene graph, Unity docs, and the web to give you the most accurate assistance tailored specifically to your project. The best thing is that it's completely free to try, so if you haven't already done so, I definitely recommend you check them out by simply clicking the link in the description. I've had a lot of guests on, and I think that Core Keeper is one of the more successful games that has been on this podcast. What did that feel like when that game blew up?
That was so surreal. I feel like it changed my perception on my own life in so many different ways. Like, of course, it changes it in the sense that, okay, now you can kind of make games for a living, for sure. It's without a doubt a thing you can proceed with. I didn't know that before that. I was doing some stuff at university. I was working at another company a little bit as well. So, it's very special industry in that sense. You're kind of hustling, right? And but with Core Keeper, that kind of shifted that part for me. I also went from being, let's say, a pure developer, like, programming and doing a lot of implementation work and stuff like that, to now being way more focused on the bigger picture of the company and the kind of making sure the progress are moving in the right direction, because that became even more important, right? When you have so many players that are expecting things from you, doing things right becomes even more important. I felt like it was okay to fail in a sense before, but now it's like, holy shit, you need to really do things the right way and treat your community well and also your team members and employees, right? I have employees now, so
how many employees do you have right now?
We're about 40 people working.
What in the world? Company. That's too many. I'm being sarcastic. I had a team of 5 last year. Now it's just me, and I'm curious. You went from Radical Rabbit Stew, which Radical Rabbit Stew looks awesome, right? But from the outside, it doesn't seem like it performed nearly as well as Core Keeper, right? So you went from this tiny 2-person team making Radical Rabbit Stew, and then all of a sudden Core Keeper blows up, and then you build this massive team of 50 people, and now you're working on it's Kāora, is that how you say it? Or Kāora?
Kāora is how we pronounce it internally, but you can pronounce it any way you want to.
Yeah.
It's also
so you basically scale up into this massive indie studio of 50 people. I mean, it's almost like it's not an indie studio in a way. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. Yeah, we feel very indie still. We're talking like everybody's working so closely together. We're still working from home. Everybody's working from their home offices basically. We have a small little office in Linköping, but it's like 3-4 people who are there, and the rest are working from home like me.
So was that a hard transition for you to make? Because I know for me, when I went to a 5-person team,
Yeah.
I almost grieved the death of the granular creative process, right? My fingers are no longer touching things, right?
Yeah.
I'm not touching the code. I'm not touching the artwork anymore. And then suddenly you're in a management position and you're a creative director as well, but like there is management there as well. And I'm curious, was that hard for you?
Actually not. I feel like I've been making games by myself and in like small constellations for so long. Like I started modding games when I was very young, right? I started making different game projects when I was before 10 years old, right? So I've been making games for a very, very long time. And it eventually got to a point around like Core Keeper, I would say, where it felt like, okay, now we released Radical Rabbids 2 to Nintendo Switch, Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. And what became more interesting for me was to build something that really, sustains for a lifetime, in a sense, right? And also building these worlds that, Kāora and Core Keeper became way more important than, say, programming or drawing something or like, for example, I made the music myself in the beginning. I don't do that anymore. But that was super fun. But I don't feel like I need to do that anymore. I've done it so many times already, and it's just way more interesting to kind of see how these very cool projects can attract so many players and add value to their lives. I look back at games like Donkey Kong Country, Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Like these games had such an immense impact on myself and my life in very, very positive ways, I will say. That I feel that's so much more important for me today to be able to create those kinds of experiences, right, for people. And like if some kids or teenagers or people can experience even a small portion of what I experience in those kind of games due to what I create together with my team, like that's for me that makes me very happy and feel very fortunate.
Yeah. Would you struggle if somebody snapped their fingers and suddenly you were solo or you were working completely alone? Would it be hard for you to go back to that sort of mentality of doing everything?
Yeah, that's a very good. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's a very good question. But I think so. I think the types of games I want to make are extremely hard to make by yourself. Like extremely, extremely hard to make by yourself because they constitute large simulated worlds. There are networking problems you have to solve by making a lot of people being able to play together. The community aspects. There's the different systems that interact with each other. Like in Core Keeper, we have cooking, we have automation, railways, we have all sorts of cool things. And what really makes me interested in those systems, how to make them interact in interesting ways, right? And that's like if I were to make Core Keeper by myself, that would take 20 years, right? It wouldn't be feasible. It's just too big of a beast. And the same thing with Kāora. It's that type of project, right? That needs a dedicated team.
I find it fascinating talking to developers on this podcast because you get some developers who are so adamant about staying very, very small. And I'm kind of in that mentality right now is I'm just like, I want to keep this thing so small. And then I talk to developers like you who love to scale and they enjoy scaling to a larger team. Do you think that the cost of a game is shrunk or increased by scaling the team? It's a hard question to ask. What I mean is time.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, so basically, like if I were to assume that we made Core Keeper with, say, 2 people instead, like would the time that those 2 people use to make that whole thing take longer or not, right? I think it would be impossible to reach the quality level we are at, right? People are so specialized right now on the various things that they're working on. Like, for example, Jonathan Gear, who's making the music, right? Even though I can make music and I love making music, there's no way I can make as fitting and good music as he can, right? It's just at another level. And the same applies to whichever part of the team you look at, right? Every person on the team is so specialized at this point. I guess except myself. I'm the least specialized person on the team, right? But that makes it very, very hard to do it in a solo product way, right? And I will also say this about scaling. I don't enjoy scaling for the sake of scaling. I just enjoy being able to make these projects that I think are pushing the boundaries of what other games have done in the kind of adventure sandbox genre, right? So for example, in Kāora, every pixel can be terraformed, and that's done in multiplayer. And it's a huge procedurally generated world. I have never seen another game do that. And I don't think that's a project you can do by yourself very easily. It's very, very tricky. And technically, it's a big challenge. And then you kind of want it to look amazing as well, and feel amazing, and sound amazing. And just doing one of these things in Kāora, like the technical side of things, would be extremely difficult and challenging by yourself, right? It would take years, I think. But I'm not planning to scale much more at this point with the company. I think we're in a very good size to pull off the projects and the goals that we have with our games.
Do you feel a lot of pressure, in particular, keeping everybody happy on the team?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the more challenging parts of like leading a company. Because that's another part of it. You know, you need to make. We are humans who are making these games, and for us to be able to create value and perform and so on, you know, you need to feel good as well, and you need to have a sustainable life. And that's very tricky, and especially so when we have like a remote first approach to making games. Like sometimes it can be very hard for me to know how people are feeling if they work, you know, in a different time zone. Maybe there's like a small overlap in when you work, and it makes it trickier. We're trying our best. I think we're doing very good. It seems to me that the people are doing great in the team, but it's something I'm very conscious about, you know, that we need to keep track of and have.
What are some things that you feel like you have to do to keep your team happy? So for example, like for me, certain people on my team, I had to be really like encouraging and remind them that they're doing a good job. And so it was this constant like cheering the team on. Whereas other people on the team, that it wasn't that I needed to cheer them on. It was actually that I needed to not cheer them on, because the way one person was motivated was to actually give them a little bit of distance. And like, because if I cheered too much, then they're like, okay, I'm good. You know, I don't need to be creative here. So it's kind of, for me, it was kind of like I needed to know how their personality ticked.
Yeah.
You know, do you know what I mean? So what are some things that you feel like you had to do have to do currently to keep your team happy?
So I think there's so many things. Like if we look at what you just brought up here, different personalities, I think you're right on that. You know, you kind of need to understand the personalities of different people. Like what are their strengths and weaknesses? Like everybody has those, both of them, right? So like what are the personality traits? Like how extroverted is a person versus introverted? Like some people that are extroverted are very non-social as well. Like they need like social connection like very frequently, but they are not very, you know, talkative. So you kind of need to spot those people as well, and you need to be able to create a platform for them to enjoy working as well. I'm very introverted. I would say I'm extremely introverted in the sense that I can
really?
I can work in solitude for like months and feel very good about it, right? I don't need social a lot of social connection, but I have also realized I appear to people as being very social, right? I like when
same
I
here,
talk
dude.
to people.
Same here.
So there's kind of like that distinguishing factor. But that means for me, I think like one weakness, like if I look at myself as a leader, is to listen in to those people who are extroverted and understand what they need, right? So for example, we have meetups in the company, like a summer meetup. Everybody in the company flew in from all over the world to Sweden just 2 weeks ago. And we met in Stockholm, and, you know, we had a very social gathering. We went to restaurants, we went on a boat in the Swedish archipelago.
Oh, dude, this is making me nervous. I'm like breaking out in cold sweats.
That's exactly how I feel about it. But some people, like most people, enjoy this so much, and it's so important for them, like this physical interaction, like meeting and seeing each other's faces. So I need to be aware of that. Like this is very, very important for other people. I'm like, maybe we can, you know, skip it. Maybe we can do it digitally, right? No. So there is always that thing you need to be aware of.
You're incredibly successful now, and a lot of people look up to you. And I think that Core Keeper, and I just know Kāora is going to do amazing. It just looks incredible.
Thanks.
You have these I don't know what to call them. They're like scaffolding for. Well, how about I speak for me, because I don't want to judge you. But like for me, like if I make a great game or if I succeed in something, it's this nice ego scaffolding where I can be like, okay, Thomas is living a good life, and Thomas is doing everything right, and he's happy with who he is. When I was growing up, I didn't have that. And I'm not saying this is good or bad. Like, I don't think my ego should be supported by products that I build, but it does feel nice to have things that, like, being creative and doing well at it. It feels good, right?
Yeah.
When I was growing up, I didn't have that, so I didn't really know who I was, growing up through school and through college. And once I finally had games that were supporting me and I started making money, it was this huge relief of like, okay, I was misunderstood growing up, but now I know why, because I'm really good at this one thing.
Yeah.
What about you? Do you feel something like that? Growing up, did you feel different, or did you feel like, I don't know?
Yeah, very much so. I grew up in a very small town in northern Sweden, and there were very few people who were interested in games when I was a kid, right? I was one out of very few. Other people were very much interested in sports, and actually today I enjoy sports way more than I did back then.
Really?
Yeah, but back then, I was like a bit of a weird kid, because I just wanted to be by the computer, play games, make stuff. Like I remember using the scenario editor in Heroes 3 for like hundreds of hours, right? Stuff like that.
What editor was that? Say that again.
Heroes 3, Might and Magic, yeah. And
Heroes 3?
Yeah, Heroes 3. It's one of the best games
it's the
ever.
Game. I thought you were talking about the
game.
engine. No, so you would just play this game. Gotcha.
I played.
Gotcha.
It had a great scenario editor, so you could sit down and make levels for it. Yeah, and you can make them so beautiful as well, because there was these props and trees and stuff that you can.
Dude, I've never. You know what's so funny is, how old are you, by the way?
How old am I? 34.
30. Okay, so we're the same age. Yeah,
Okay,
we're both.
cool.
I'm 34 as well.
Yeah.
And I played Age of Empires 2 growing up, Age of Empires 1, Warcraft, StarCraft. I have never seen this game, and which
really? Wow.
probably is very embarrassing to say. I've never seen this game. It's beautiful. Wow. It's so, oh man, these retro graphics look so good.
Yeah.
I just had Jeff Vogel on. I don't know if you know who Jeff Vogel is, but he still makes games that look like this.
Yeah.
And he does it with the same way he did it in the 90s. He does it right now.
Yeah.
Which there's just such a purity there. He's been doing game development for 30 years. But anyway, it looks like this, and this is just gorgeous. So anyway, back to what you were saying.
Oh yeah, so what we were talking about, about the childhood, right?
Yeah. And you were playing Heroes 3, yeah.
Yeah, so it was very hard for me to find other people who were also interested in games until I was maybe like 12 and 13. So I remember being like picked on for, liking games and stuff like that for many, many years. But then Counter-Strike kind of started becoming popular, and I was very good at Counter-Strike when I was young. I started playing it when it, like 1.0 released very, very early. So that's when I kind of realized, okay, I'm pretty good at this with games, right? I played a lot of games. It's quite easy for me to get good at them quite quick, and I can kind of build a little bit of a social circle around that, right? So that kind of became my safe haven. I skipped school a lot. Like I had maybe 50% attendance through high school and before that as well. I didn't enjoy school at all. So I did not have very good self-confidence, and I did not understand where I was going. I was even going to be able to make games for a living, right? I didn't even understand if that was a possibility, especially coming from like a small little town in northern Sweden. You had no other people who were making games there. But then when I got to university, I started meeting a lot of like-minded people, like people who wanted to make games and were good at making cool stuff that were related to games.
Mm-hmm.
And I think over the years there, that kind of changed my perspective a lot and gained me a lot of confidence. But of course, especially with Core Keeper releasing, it shifted even more towards, okay, we can do this.
I find it fascinating to think that, can you imagine going back to your old self and saying, hey, you're going to lead a team of 50 people and you're going to be making these games that have how many reviews do you have? Oh, can I ask how many copies of Core Keeper you've sold?
It's above 4 million now, so I think we're closing in like 4.5 or something.
Yeah. That's crazy, dude. That is so cool. Yeah, dude,
cool.
imagine talking to yourself in high school and saying, hey, you're going to sell millions of copies of this thing and you're going to have a team of 50 people.
Yeah. I would never believe it. It's just absurd. Like the number is absurd. It's very hard to understand.
It's crazy. What's the biggest challenge you think? What kind of personal challenges did you have? Like with your personality, going from basically this high schooler that had no confidence, that got made fun of making games, to getting way up here. Like, how did you get there emotionally to be able to lead this team? Did it just happen and it just was natural, or were there painful rungs that you had to climb that you were like, man, I'm not able to get to 10 people, or I really struggle talking to people or leading a team?
There's so many small steps towards it. Like I remember constellations in which I was making games and it just completely failed for one reason or another. You know, it's like you have different expectations on each other, or somebody loses interest and you kind of blame yourself, like, oh, I didn't manage to get that person to think it was cool. So, you know, kind of the team ended up, you know, dissolving. Like there's so many situations like that I can think of. So like after doing that for a very long time and you kind of successfully build Parkstorm, I think that's kind of when you realize that you have gained some skills and knowledge from all of those failures. You know, it's very cliche in one way, but I think it's really true. You kind of need to fail to succeed in a sense, right?
Did you build those teams, and were you always the leader, or did you just fit into a group of and there was a different leader?
There have been different leaders in different constellations.
When you say constellation, what do you mean? I'm so sorry. What do you mean by constellation?
So basically, a few people making a project for some reason, right? So it could be like, for example, in high school, you know, one person has an idea, talks it with someone else, they start working on it in their spare time. That's kind of like a constellation of two.
I see.
Right?
I see.
But you could have like 5 people coming from different universities or different countries, or you know, for example, Julian, I found him on DeviantArt. So you know, I have many constellations like that of different peoples with different backgrounds.
Oh, beautiful art. Okay, so he did the cover art. Gotcha. And
I did the cover art.
Did he do the pixel art as well?
He did a lot of the pixel art, especially in the beginning. Like, for example, for Radical Rabbits, he made basically all of the pixel art. I made some. There were some other people also did some, but he did like 95% of the pixel art on Radical Rabbits.
Gotcha.
And then on Core Keeper, we had a few more artists, but he did basically all art direction, right? So he directed all the artists that worked on the project.
Can you give me some advice on how to find a team? Is everybody just in Sweden and you just hang out with people in Sweden, or what? You know, how are you finding these people?
With Julian, he's in Berlin. I didn't meet him physically for 6 years or something like that. You know, when I formed the company with him, I had never met him in real life. So it's
that's so funny. Yeah. Well, the whole dude, I've been making this game called Twisted Tower for 3 years.
Yeah.
And it's like BioShock.
It's super cool, by the way. I looked into it. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah. If only I could make the world fully destructible, I might be as successful as you with that game. But it's very linear, so it's like an early 2000s shooter. But anyway, you know, I've been working on that game for 3 years, and for the first 3, I'm solo now, but for the first 3, Felipe, my artist, he and I never met in person ever. Yeah, you know, he was in Canada, and so we became really close friends on Discord. You know what I mean? Just working on a game through Discord and GitHub. You know,
that's the exact same thing as me and Julian started. Yeah, it's the exact same.
So, what about all these other team members? How are you finding them?
So my first 2 employees, except Julian, they were my 2 best friends from university. Like 2 programmers, and we did like all the courses together, and in every course we did at university, we kind of tried to make a spin on it into game development. So like, for example, linear algebra that became like 3D graphics in a game, or if there was like a course about, let's say, hardware, we made like a GPU that you could play Bomberman on, like stuff like that, right?
Wow.
So it was very super fun to work with them on all these different projects at university. So basically I reached out to them. Hey, I need your help to finish this game, Radical Rabbit Stew. You know, it's going way too slow when I'm doing it myself. Can you come in and help me wrap it up? And so they joined the company. So that's how I met them. And then like a lot of the recruitments and people joining after that were like friends that I've been doing projects with before, or people I met at university. And in the most recent year, a lot of them have been like super talented people we found online or on like Twitter or wherever. You know, it's like people I've been stalking for a long time, basically.
Sure.
You know, yeah, great pixel artists, for example, that I've known.
Something I've discovered doing this podcast, I think you're like the 46th episode, so 46 different developers. I have found that Europeans tend to favor these very constructive communal teams where in a way there's not a hierarchy. I know that you're the leader, but they're much more flat organizations. And number two, whereas Americans like me, I'm like, I want to be in charge, you know? and so but in particular, what I found is that the highly successful game developers that do really, really well tend to be university grads that have a team of people that started at university, and they're always European. What do you think about game school? I didn't go to game school. I didn't learn game design in school. I learned graphic, like printing. It was like graphic design, but in a printing context. Do you recommend people listening right now go to game school?
That's a good question, because I don't have experience in game school either. Like I studied, I studied engineering and computer science.
Computer science is kind of, I guess it's a derivative of game development, right?
That's true. But like, for example, I did a PhD as well. And in my PhD, I was focused on something called multi-agent systems and algorithmic game theory. So it's quite far away, I would say, from like game development in a sense. Almost every person I've recruited to the company has an engineering, like programming background, or is an artist. Like there are no like pure designers or anything like that in the company.
Okay.
And that has been working very well for PogStorm. I think it seems to be very stable in many ways. So I don't have an experience with recruiting like game designers from like game schools. So it's a bit of hard one for me to make a judgment on, I would say.
Is it wrong for me to say that Swedes are very good at programming?
I think we are.
Is that a generalization I'm allowed to say?
I think that's probably correct. There's a lot of good engineers and programmers here. Yeah, that's for sure.
Now let's talk about the marketing side and the publishing side. In my mind, I'm thinking Fredrik could self-publish. You know, he could self-publish. He doesn't need a publisher. Yet you've always worked with Fireshine, right?
Yeah, and on Kāora we're working with Chucklefish, so we have.
Oh, okay. So Chucklefish is your new publisher. Sweet. Okay.
Yeah, they're working with us on Kāora, and then Fireshine on both Core Keeper and Radical Rabbit Stew.
So Core Keeper you're still doing stuff with Core Keeper?
Yeah. We have long-term plans for that. We're doing a lot of like major updates and big content ads. That's also, you know, why we have a bit of a larger team now, is that so we can sustain, you know, both Core Keeper and our future projects at the same time.
Okay, so the first real question here when it comes to publishers, because people listening right now, dude, they want to build a team, but they're like, how am I going to pay for a team? So this is related to publishers because publishers typically fund a project, right? Yeah. That's kind of like typically the primary reason someone initially gets a publisher, and then hopefully towards the future when you've got money in the bank and you're very successful, you work with a publisher because they know how to market the project and they know how to sell it. Yeah. That's typically the best reason to get a publisher, I think. So my first real question is, how did you initially pay for that team? Even 5 people, that's a tough thing to do, to pay a team. So did you initially do partnerships where you just split the royalty and nobody got paid?
So initially, Okay, let's go back in time to Radical Rabbit Stew. I think that's an interesting.
That's kind of what I want to start with here.
Yeah, so basically, Radical Rabbit Stew, most of the development was funded by our publisher, but I decided to not take a salary for myself, for example. But the other devs got a salary, so I skipped a salary entirely for myself, so that we could have more money in the bank for future projects. And then I got a small salary from the university that I could work with. So I kind of was doing two things simultaneously, right?
Yep, that's Europe for you, man. I hear that all the time. In America, it's like, what? A university is going to pay for this thing? How?
Yeah, they didn't pay for the project, but as I was doing a PhD, PhDs in Sweden get a bit of a salary, right? So
that is so...
yeah.
Dude, I went to Slovakia, and I heard the same thing. The Slovaks are like, yeah, I don't have to have a job. I just go to school. And I'm like, in America, you go wildly in debt to go to school.
Yeah.
Or you work your butt off and pay for school.
It's very different in Sweden. We get paid for going to school. Like we get stipends and all sorts of things. So you kind of go plus if you live, fairly frugal, which I did. I didn't spend on anything, right? So I was saving a lot of money during my whole university studies. I was saving while I was making Radical Rabbit Stew, even though I didn't take a salary, So
you didn't take a salary, but you did have money to pay to eat, right?
Yeah, to eat. I was living in like a student dorm for most of the time, so it was very, very, very cheap. You were sharing the same corridor with 7 other people, basically.
But you did not split the revenue with anybody except for Fireshine.
Yeah, that's true.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was your company and then Fireshine who had royalties.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to answer any of this, you don't have to. But royalties, in terms of royalty splits, you've got Fireshine and then you've got your studio. And then you come to an agreement and you split the revenue, split the pie.
Yeah.
But the team is getting paid through Fireshine, effectively.
That's right. They fund the development of the project. So I can use that funding to pay the salaries of the people working on the project. So that's kind of how it works. And same with Core Keeper, was kind of the same process there, but we had a bit of a larger budget. We had a very good relationship with Fireshine at this point. We had been, even though the game didn't sell well commercially, it was very well received. We hit all the kind of Radical Rabbit Stew, it didn't sell. Okay. Yeah, that didn't sell super well, but we had a great collaboration with Fireshine when we made it. Like, we were very aligned on all the milestones and all the beats, so it was a very like a breeze making the game in a sense.
I kind of want to say something offensive here, so please forget. I'm not trying to. I don't know how the best way to ask this.
Yeah, go ahead.
How did typically when a publisher signs an indie and the game doesn't really perform, why would they sign another project with you? Radical Rabbids, it didn't blow up, at least on Steam. It didn't blow up.
Yeah, but I think it's very clear why it didn't blow up. Like I was not expecting it to sell well, to be honest. It was not meant as a commercial product when we started it. It was a hobby project. And we won some, local game competitions with it. And publishers started contacting us and saying, hey, we can help you get this game to Nintendo Switch and Xbox and play. And that was a dream for me. I never released on this platform. So for me, that was like, yeah, I wanna do this. Like, it doesn't matter what I have to do. I'm gonna get this game to the Switch, to the PlayStation, to the Xbox. Like that was a mission for me almost. I also think it was clear from Fireshine's perspective that, when they saw the results of Radical Rabbit, that Pugstrom had done, everything that we had promised to do plus more. It was a great success in that way. It was a very low budget project as well. And now we wanted to move to something that's more commercially viable, which in a sense was Core Keeper, right? So I think they could kind of see the rationale behind that and how that could turn out very well. I think that's why, but I mean, you would have to ask them, of course, but I think also partly because we had such a great relationship and it had been such a breeze for both of us working together.
I think that even me, sometimes I forget the value that a publisher sees in a developer that they can trust. I think half of a publisher's problem is that they don't know who to trust when it comes to developers.
Yeah.
And it sounds like what you're saying is they just knew you very well and they trusted you, that you could finish a project, and then that they weren't going to have problems with you when it came to like milestones, that their money that they were giving you was actually being spent on the game.
Yeah.
Right. When it comes to Radical Rabbit, you've got a retro game here that would have probably done incredibly well in 1997.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because I'm assuming it's very linear and that
Yeah.
it's just a fun adventure game. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true. It's a very linear game. It's very correct.
Would you ever do that again? Would you ever, knowing that that's hard to sell, would you do it again?
I would probably do it if I think it was sufficiently exciting, like adding something to the, let's say, linear puzzle games genre in a sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
But right now, I'm just so excited about these like sandbox adventures that, that world that is simulated, that I just want to put all my focus on that genre, right? So
yeah.
So in that sense, probably no, not now, but maybe in the future. Who knows? Yeah.
If you added if Radical Rabbit, let's pretend for a second here. If Radical Rabbit had sandbox elements, what do you think would have happened to it?
I think it's still like very niche. It's like slapstick humor. It's like it's a character that's very hard to project yourself onto. The game has very few similarities to other games, so it's very hard for people to kind of pitch it to each other. It lacks all of the characteristics that I think made Core Keeper successful. So I think just doing that shift with Radical Rabbits, it would still have been a commercial failure. I'm pretty confident.
Wow.
I'm very proud of Radical Rabbits too. Like, it's a fantastic
amazing,
game.
Dude.
Yeah, it's
so
a great
beautiful.
game actually. I'm very proud of it in many ways. But it is not a game that has any commercial, let's say, intelligence behind it. Let's say.
Yeah. Let's do a little experiment here.
Yeah.
Let's figure out together. This is going to be really helpful for people listening, because I can't tell you how many times I've played people's games from my audience, because I'll do like live streams and I'll play their games. They have the same sort of problem that Radical Rabbit has, which is it looks like a great game. It's good, but it doesn't work in the modern era.
Yeah.
It doesn't solve the problem that, let's say, younger generations want solved, which is they want a replayable game where they can, like you said, project themselves into the world. So let's do something here. Let's do this. Let's pretend we want to make Radical Rabbit a game that sells $4 million gross revenue. What do we need to do to make it happen for Radical Rabbit? What are some things that you do as a designer and as a creative director? What would you do to make it happen? I know it might not even be possible, but this is helpful for people listening, because they're thinking, okay, I've got a game like Radical Rabbit.
Yeah.
What do I need to do to make this actually sell well?
How big adjustments am I, able to make? Because I think it really depends on what you want to do, right?
Let's keep the name Radical Rabbit. It's Radical Rabbit Stew, by the way, right?
Yeah, Radical Rabbit Stew.
Let's keep the name, or at least the idea of a rabbit.
Yeah.
What would you do? What would you do?
Oh, wow.
Let's try and figure this out.
Oh, that's a great question. That's a really fun exercise. Yeah, I think it really depends on what you want to do. Like, do you want to you just want to focus on, let's say,
revenue,
building a company and earning a lot of cash, or do you want to, push the boundaries of the kind of adventure sandbox space while making these $4 million? Like, there's so many questions there.
The goal is, I am God, and I come in and I say, hey, you must make this game. You must remake Radical Rabbit.
Yeah.
And you must make $4 million.
Yeah.
If you don't do it,
Jesus Christ,
you go to prison for the rest of your life. What do you need to do to make it happen? It's all about revenue. How do we make it profitable?
Yeah. Wow. I would pivot towards something that's more social, like, for example, co-op, or something along the lines of maybe Super Mario Odyssey, where you have like sandbox worlds with puzzles that you can play in together. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that has some potential, but at the same time, I think you would need to shift the IP completely. I think that's like one of the main issues with Radical Rabbits too. Like, you would need to borrow the Super Mario IP and do like Radical Rabbits Stew Super Mario or whatever.
What do you mean by that?
So Radical Rabbits Stew as an IP is extremely hard to build, like a community and people to like it around. Like, And I think the reason for that is what I just mentioned about the projectability. Like, it's very hard for you to project yourself onto the main character. It's very hard for you to kind of project yourself into this world. It's just too whimsical and strange.
Oh, I see. So,
right?
Can you explain what you mean specifically by projecting yourself onto this world? What does that mean? Because Banjo-Kazooie, I could have projected in the 90s. I was able to project myself onto that character. But in 2025, can people project themselves onto a bear and a bird?
Yeah. It's just harder, I think it's doable. It's just harder. And today there's just so much competition. So like if Banjo-Kazooie came today, I think it would have had a much harder time. Get through the noise, I think
unless you got nostalgia players. Let's say you've got 1 million people who have that nostalgia. They're going to go play ukulele and they're going to feel that nostalgia.
Yeah.
But is it a character problem? Is it the fact that it's a rabbit? Is that the problem?
It's a holistic analysis. Like, for example, something that helps a lot with player projection is like if you can customize your character or if you can change it. Like, for example, the more niche your character is that you have to play as, or like the more defined it is, in a sense, the harder it will be for a majority of the people to be able to project themselves onto that character and sympathize with it, right? That's just like how human psychology works. It's very, very difficult. So like one way to get around that is to allow the player to customize themselves in any way in which they want to, right? So that's like a core, no pun intended, like facet of like how we did it in Core Keeper, right? You can play as any character. You don't have to play as this weird blue character we have in Rabbit's Tube, but you can have, for example, if I was playing, maybe I have brown hair or type of eyes that I have or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that helps. But there's so many other aspects to it, like the world itself as well. Like if it's too strange, it just adds another obstacle for the game director to make the player be able to feel that this is a realistic world that could have existed. For example, Star Wars does this in a great way. It's a strange world, but it also feels very realistic and something you can really feel that could exist out there in another planet, in another world, in another dimension, right? It's very similar in many ways.
It feels Western. I don't know if you know what I mean by that.
Yeah, but it feels Western. Yeah.
The politics of it, the good and evil.
Yeah.
It's very American. Western is the best way I can describe it. So, But then again, Star Wars resonates with the entire world. So George Lucas did a great job creating a world that felt like a sandbox, where it's like, I think this is why Disney bought it. I don't think they did a good job with it, but the reason they bought it is because it's like, hey, we have a nice canvas where people could put themselves. That's so interesting. It's hard for me to hear that, because the only type of games that I can make are the ones that are very niche, a very precise and distinct world. And that's why my games don't do, 100,000 copies. They're very niche. My current game is very BioShocky. It's based in this very dark, decrepit world, very Disney World-like world.
Yeah.
And the character is an insecure young man he's not like a hero, a typical hero. And I know that, and I knew that going in. I knew going in that it's like there's going to be a small portion of the world who will understand this character. Yeah. And maybe identify with this character. My worry with what you're saying is that's a risky decision to make everything. It feels like it might water down a vision.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah,
and I think that's what the main responsibility of the game director or the main developer of a game is, to kind of make sure that it doesn't get watered down. Like that you really take out some key turns in the game and really push some boundaries, right, to make it really exciting and new and fresh. Because absolutely, but I think there is like these pattern or these tricks you can use, like all the things you mentioned, for example, that it has this BioShock-esque vibe to it. I think that's one of those ways in which people are going to relate to it. They're going to see it's like BioShock, but it's like this. So it makes it very easy for people to pitch the game to themselves and to other people, so that you get like an organic growth factor there. So you kind of have the same thing with Core Keeper, where people might say it's like Terraria, but it's top-down 2D, or it's like Zelda, but it's like a sandbox adventure. Like these help a lot with it. But it's something I think that I don't know if your game does this, but I could imagine it could work. Is this Isekai design patterns of narrative. So, for example, Star Wars does it in a very subtle way. Harry Potter does it, Lord of the Rings does it, Core Keeper does it, Undertale does it, Zelda does it. Like all of these very successful IPs does it. And I think that's tied to this projectability of the player onto the main character, because the main character in all of those IPs that I mentioned and the games is as new to the world as the player is. So you're on the same journey together with the main character as you as the player, and that's a very, very, very strong narrative design pattern that I'm very, very excited about.
So specifically, what you're saying is that Harry Potter is discovering the world with you, with the audience.
Yeah.
Frodo is discovering the world with the audience. True with BioShock as well.
Yeah. BioShock is very much so, yeah.
And you're saying Radical Rabbit, it's like he understands the world?
Yeah, he understands the world too much. So it just makes it a bit harder to project yourself onto it. And of course, like there's no hard rules on this. Like you can, let's skip that part, but then maybe you need some of the other things that make it so that you can empathize with the main character or sympathize with him. And basically, like all the Studio Ghibli movies, they are like this. There's like pretty much no Ghibli movie that has this kind of pattern. And for example, the most Swedish author, her name is Astrid Lindgren. Like all her books, exact same pattern. It's like, so you don't have to do it, but it's an extremely strong narrative base. And Stardew Valley does it as well. Minecraft does it. It's like,
you're right. You're right. So one of the strongest, one of the best tricks to creating a great game is to essentially, it's almost like you think about your protagonist as the player, right? Do you kind of know what I'm saying? When you're making the game, you go, it's not the protagonist, it's the player.
In one sense, but I think it's more about making the player implicitly project themselves into the main character. And so you don't need to be the main character. The main character can be completely different to who you are. Like, for example, I don't know, like let's say Rey in Star Wars. Like, I do project myself onto her when I watch the movie because it has this Isekai element, and it's a kind of generic type of character. She's very different to me in many ways, but it still has sufficiently many projectable like surface areas that I'm able to do it very straightforwardly and in a very natural fashion.
So you say Isekai element, and I just got AI to tell me what that is because I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
AI says, Google's AI says, it's a character being transported or reborn into a different fantastical world. Yeah. One of my favorite movies is Hook. Have you seen Hook?
No, I haven't. I haven't even heard of it.
Okay, so this is it's a brilliant film. It does the Isekai element really well. The thing about Hook was the hook of Hook was, what if Peter Pan grew up and he goes back to Neverland? Now the problem with that is that removes the Isekai element because it's like, well, he knows everything about it. And in fact, even in the original Peter Pan understands the world, but Wendy does not.
Yeah.
Right. And so she's the person we're projecting ourselves onto.
Yes.
With Hook, Spielberg was like, how do I get the Isekai element on Peter Pan? And so what he did with that was he said, well, he forgets. And he forgets Neverland. And when he goes back, it's all new to him. And he's an old man, which is a brilliant hook. But I totally understand what you're saying about this Isekai element. Man, this is so helpful, by the way, because I did playtesting with Twisted Tower last year, and people listening right now who listen to the podcast are probably really annoyed with me right now because I talk about this all the time. But when I did playtesting, the creator of Cultic, his name is Jason Smith, he played the game and he was like, dude, does the player understand, or does the protagonist know this world, or does he not?
Yeah.
And that created this huge rift where he was like, I don't sympathize with the character because I don't know what he's thinking.
Yeah.
And Gordon Freeman, for example, I don't know if Gordon Freeman in Half-Life has the Isekai element because you know this place. You're the scientist and you understand this place. So what Jason Smith said was, he was like, Thomas, it seems like you're trying to give this silent protagonist that Gordon Freeman vibe, but it's not working for you. And so what he said was, instead of trying to make the silent protagonist like Gordon Freeman, the hack is just have the player, like one time, have the protagonist say, where am I?
Hell is this place?
Or what's going on?
Yeah.
And so all the game needed at the beginning, in the first 3 minutes of the game, was the player saying to himself, what is this place?
Yeah.
And that all of a sudden helps everything so much. You know what I mean?
That's beautiful.
So I wonder if with Radical Rabbit, back to the original question of making this game better, I wonder if at the very beginning, Radical Rabbit is transported to the land of teddy bears, you know, and he doesn't know that world. So that could help. How can people listening right now know before they finish their game that it can't be salvaged? I'm asking you tough questions, I know.
Yeah,
but these are things that developers need to know. They need to know. I need to know.
Yeah.
At the beginning of a project, like, don't move forward with this thing. If you want to make money,
you need to be really honest with yourself. Like, really, really honest about how the design decisions affect the potential for like player growth. You need to understand psychology, why people share a game with their friends. Because like a game like Core Keeper, the reason so many players have played it is because of our players sharing the game with other players. Like that's the main key driver for its commercial success. And that is why the community is growing, you know, because people enjoy playing the game, they get a lot of value, it's very valuable to them, and they want to share it with other people. And it's very easy for them to share it with other people. So, you know, it's that's built into the whole art direction, to the game design, to everything, right, in a sense.
Shareability
maybe it's a word for it. Projectability is another one. Like I mentioned, it makes it very easy for you to kind of get into it. And
what?
Projectability for the player to project himself into the character.
Okay.
I think these are like aspects you need to be honest about as a developer. Like, which of these vectors do you want to go down? Because they will have effects on you and your creative endeavor and your artistic goals and what you want to do with your life, right? It's very tough questions you need to ask yourself, like what you want to do and why you want to do it.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you had a solid vision. You had to formulate a solid vision with Core Keeper with your team before you even decided to work with a publisher and to move forward with the project. I struggle with this because for me personally, I have trouble knowing what the vision of my game is until I've made it. Yeah. It's imagine building a house and you don't even know what the blueprints are until you've made it.
Yeah.
And which means you have to tear down the house 20 times before you finally know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that with Core Keeper? Did you have the design in place before you built the project?
So the way we worked with Core Keeper was that we had a very clear like vision. Like the game direction was very much in place. Like these are the things that we are going to have in the game, and this is kind of how it's going to work. But the way we work with games is we work very iteratively on the details. So we have no like big game design document where everything is outlined in precision. We have no like particular documents that outline any of the like smaller details, but only like the bigger points. And then we kind of work from there. So in that sense, it's very much like what you described. Like, for example, we had design decisions in Core Keeper that we scrapped quite early because they didn't just work out, right?
Yeah.
For example, one of them was that enemies outside in the world were going to attack the player's base close to the core, right? So you're going to protect the core in a sense. And that's, of course, for those who have played Dungeon Keeper 2, very much inspired by kind of the heart in Dungeon Keeper 2, where you kind of defend it against enemies that come from outside, or if it traverses. But that didn't work out because a lot of the fun in the game came from like this casual exploring and adventuring and doing it very calmly with friends, and also building your base. You didn't want it to be ruined because you were decorating it and making it very cozy, right? So there was like a mismatch between those two kind of directions, right? So we scrapped that very early on. And there are other things like that we kind of tried out and didn't work out. But I see them more as details. Like most of the bigger design decisions were already in place. Like, for example, you had the core, you were going to start there. You had the whole Isekai approach to the narrative that you have in Core Keeper. We had the intro slides clear. You know, everything was like designed around how the boss progression was going to work and how they were going to slot into the statues between the close to the core. So a lot of that was there very early on.
Man, dude. Okay. So let's shift gears here and let's jump into if you want to jump into the project. And so you mentioned you want to just jump into the game itself and sort of show and describe how it's created, right?
I think that would be great. Yeah, I think that's better. It's probably more interesting to think about the bigger picture stuff than the
sure.
I think that's.
Let's do it, man.
Yeah, starting game. Let's see. I think this is the first interesting part of the game. It's like, you can create your character, and we have a lot of different options you can go with. And the reason here is also, you want the player to be able to project themselves onto the character.
That's right. And it's like you said earlier, it's a hack. It's a hack. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. It really helps as well with multiplayer games, because in multiplayer games, I think there's always a bit of a challenge to kind of make sense. All of the different characters have the same importance to the world and the story without making them be characters who have set backgrounds already, right? And Isekai, helps with that, because all of them can have the same background, and all of them are thrown into this world together with the same kind of understanding of it, right? So here, for example, in the intro slides, it was very important to give a vibe of the game, of course, but also to make sure it introduces the player to this conception or idea of that you are as new to this world as the main character is, right?
I love that. That is so helpful.
Yeah. And there's a mystery right from the get-go. So that's also something that I think is something you might miss in Core Keeper, is when you start the game, the first thing you're introduced to is there's a mystery that you as the player needs to solve. You can skip solving it if you want to. You can do whatever. You don't have to care about it. But it's always there in the background as like a main quest, right? It's like always there. It's like
it's a through line.
Yeah.
And this is true with David Lynch films. I don't know if you've ever seen any of his films.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There's always a mysterious emotional through line that all of the abstraction is built on top of.
Yes.
So if it's only abstraction, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
You need that mystery.
That's exact same here. And I don't know if you saw the question mark on the main character. And that's basically boiling down exactly what you mentioned before with your character in your game to like, what is the minimal voice line or like text we can do for the player to say, hey, I have no clue where I am, right? Yeah. So a question mark works all languages. We don't have to care about localization.
That's right.
And it's like the smallest amount of bits we can use to convey that information to the player.
That's brilliant.
And then, you just start playing. And already here you can see there's like a little bit of vague light that you can look around and see what the game is about. But here we're also trying to make it as minimal as possible to what you can see in the starting screen. Like, so for example, you can see the core, which is the main mystery. You just saw it in the slides. You've been introduced to it. And then, okay, what is this for? Looks like it needs energy. Wow, that's your main quest in a sense, right?
Yep.
And then there's a bunch of roots nearby. So what is the point here? Well, it's to teach the player that you need to start hitting with your fist to be able to progress into the game. So you start doing that. Oh, wow, that works. Cool. And then you see stuff popping up into your inventory and kind of introduced to that, oh, there's an inventory and there's an action bar and all of that. But even more importantly, it introduces you to the fact that, you can hit stuff, right? So maybe you start hitting the walls and you start, oh, they crack more the more I hit them. And then bam, you're kind of left with that impression that, okay, I can destroy everything. I can hit stuff. Mm-hmm. Wow, okay, interesting. And I see something down here. Maybe I can, start hitting stuff to get down there. But, it takes so long to mine around. So let's see what I have in my backpack, right? So you kind of bring that up and you see some tools. And that kind of brings you into how the crafting system works, like immediately, and like all the basic ideas of the whole game loop are introduced here.
Yeah. Hey, is this lighting? So you mentioned this is indirect lighting, right?
Yeah, this is global illumination. It's
global illumination. So is it Unity's? Is it something that Unity had?
No.
Or you built it?
We built it. It's an extremely customized pipeline. Like, I think at this point, I don't even know if it's like Unity anymore. It's like so much customized stuff on top of it.
That's so cool.
So you can kind of see if I go here, you can see the light seeping through there, right? So you can kind of see it going through the whole room here in a very beautiful, realistic fashion.
So you're not even using Unity lighting at all?
No, we're not using it at all. We're using something called Radiance Cascades. I don't know how many release games use this. I think it's probably... I know Path of Exile 2 is the first game that used it, and they did like a very beautiful presentation on how that algorithm works. So we implemented it in Core Keeper right after that presentation. and it's extremely efficient and makes for such beautiful lighting. So, we even have global illumination on Switch. I don't know how many games has that on the Switch.
I can't imagine how you got that running, but that's like trying to get real-time lighting running on a toaster.
Yeah. So you can see like all of them have like cast shadows and all that cool stuff. And
golly,
like
I totally understand what you're saying, though. Earlier you said it was more than just a visual goal; it was a mechanical goal.
Yeah,
the lighting, it's part of the game design.
Exactly. I'm gonna show you this as well, because like if you start here, you don't see these statues, right? But one of the first things you craft in the game is a torch, and immediately as you craft the torch, you see like a hint of it, and it becomes like revealed to you as the player. So then you have the next part of the main quest, right? First you saw here, you need energy, and wait, what is this? On the floor, and it's tied to a statue. Okay, maybe I need to put something in this crystal slot. So it's like very tied together in the game design, right?
Yep.
So that's kind of what kicks off the whole experience in Core Keeper.
Okay, so this was made in Unity. Where was the art made?
So all sorts of tools. For example, Julian uses Photoshop for his pixel art, but some of our pixel art use Sprite. And then we have bosses that are fully 3D as well in the game. And they use completely different tools, right? Because you need to make the 3D meshes and you need to animate them and so on and so forth. So that's also something that's cool with this game. It's actually rendered in 3D and then it's projected onto the pixel art. So like all of these walls are actually rendered as 3D meshes.
Okay, that makes so much more sense now. Now that, because I was so confused how you're going to do this lighting in a 2D world. But that makes complete sense now. So would you, if you, is it possible to, not in the build, but like in Unity, can you see it in 3D? Like, can you rotate the camera and stuff?
You can see it in 3D. There's a bunch of GIFs and screenshots floating around the internet where we have like posted how it looks in Unity.
I'll have my editor put it on the screen right now.
Yes, please do that. And it works fairly well, but of course it's a completely different experience, and it removes some of the kind of limited focal view that you have in the game right now. So it becomes a different experience.
You know how sometimes it feels like a really dark game is difficult to look good in the marketing material because 70% of the screen is black.
Yeah.
And I talked to the developer of Choo Choo Charles about this. Did you guys struggle with that?
Not really. I can answer that question.
Yeah,
I think
ahead.
I understand what you mean. Yeah. I think the opposite is true, because the darkness really helps frame a lot of the screenshots and put the focus on what we want to convey with the screenshots. Like if there's a boss, you can basically design the lighting in that screenshot to emphasize whatever it is that you want to emphasize. And I also think it makes the game look very different to a lot of other games in the genre. Like, for example, Minecraft is largely, above ground, and you can kind of see the lighting and it's very lit. Whereas here, it has a very characteristic vibe to it because of the lighting. And as I mentioned, a lot of other games can't do this global animation that we have, or they can do it, but it's fairly tricky to optimize for. Right?
Would you say that the same principle of using darkness to emphasize the game, is that true with Kāora as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Kāora also has an above ground element to it, but that's something we're pushing a lot right now, and actually during production is on the art direction too. Okay, we need to allow the kind of custom scenes and the procedural animation to breathe, in the sense that if there's just stuff everywhere on the screen at the same time, as the player, you are going to get exhausted fairly quickly. So you kind of just want to have, like, let's see here, you have this main room in the center, and then you have some hints in the corners of other things to explore. So that really helps. But if they're too far apart, then you get into the problem that, it's a fair amount of digging that you need to do as the player to get there. So this
is all procedurally generated, right?
Yeah, it's procedurally generated.
Is it in chunks? Is it in set pieces? Or is it every tile is procedurally generated?
So every tile is procedurally generated, but there are custom scenes and different systems that allow us to manually tweak certain scenes, right? So it's not completely procedural in that sense, but all of these rivers are procedurally generated, and the ores and all the different green areas and so on and so forth. So I think this is also something that's very interesting with Core Keeper, and it's basically built around this central focal point, and you kind of dig outwards to progress. So it's a very natural way of progressing into a game.
Yep.
But the world is huge, of course. It's can go.
Wow, this everywhere. Is so impressive. I am so impressed by this. So what do you think unless you wanted to focus on something else, I have another question.
No, go ahead. Yeah. I'm just gonna walk around there and show you the game.
This to me is overwhelmingly positive. What is keeping you from those 4 percentage points to get to 95% on Steam?
Oh, that's a very good question.
I know it's a painful question.
Yeah, it's a very painful question because Core Keeper is surprisingly popular in Asia. And the Asian players are much harsher on Core Keeper than the Western players.
That's
so if you just look at the English-speaking players, we are above 95%.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you also take in the other regions, it's a much tougher game. So more than 50% of our players are in Asia.
Why is it popular in Asia?
It's a very good question and something we have been thinking a lot about. And I wouldn't say there is like a straightforward answer to it, but it's more, for example, the relatability. Like a lot of the Japanese players can really sense this Super Nintendo-esque era, so they have a nostalgic feel for it.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, a lot of these markets are growing right now on the PC, whereas with other sandbox games, when they were released, the PC market was much smaller. And the PC market is the main kind of market for these types of games, right? So that also helps. The timing was very good in a sense.
Yeah.
I think those are some of the main points, but then we've also been very good at like handling those communities. Like I care very much for the Japanese and Korean and Chinese communities and all other Asian communities, of course, but those are the 3 largest ones by like a big margin, right? So I tweet in Japanese, for example, and things like that, because I really want them to feel like they are part of the development as well. We listen to them too, not only the Western market. Like this is a game for everyone in the world, not only Western players.
Okay, how is the culling working?
Very straightforward.
So
just near the screen that you kind of see. Then there is some stuff that is simulated even if you're not there, and some stuff have some pretty nice, like let's say, performance hacks for us to be able to not simulate it at all, but only update it when the player is near. So it's like a very hybrid approach, but there's no like advanced algorithm to it. Let's say it's more a lot of different smart things.
So can we open up the map really quick? I have a question. Yep. Let's zoom out really far. Okay, so that far bottom left-hand corner of the blue, is anything down there rendered at all right now?
No, nothing.
Is the container down there? Is there a game object down there that has an ID? Or is it all stored in some kind of array of information?
So it loads in as you kind of go there. I'm not entirely sure exactly how we do with the memory shuffling right now, like when we unload and load in things.
Okay.
It's changed dramatically over the course of the years. So when I did programming like way back, we did things way different to what we did, for example, after we released it to consoles. Like the consoles needed a lot of optimizations that we didn't have on the PC. Mm-hmm. That benefited the PC because we brought those optimizations back into the game. Mm-hmm. So it's really changed over the years. But there's mostly like a bunch of small different things in which we handle that.
Yeah. Are you satisfied with the engine that you've built here? I mean, I say engine because it's effectively like a new engine, like you said.
Yeah.
Are you satisfied with it? Are you going to did you reuse it for Kāora, or is it a mess?
We're extremely proud of it. It's, I think, one of the like biggest assets of Pugstorm is the kind of framework, the know-how, the team also understanding how to use it in a very effective way. Allows us to be, a fairly small team compared to like big teams, but able to basically perform extremely high when it comes to, like, for example, how many updates we push out or things like that, right? So,
so you are reusing it for Kāora.
Yeah, Kāora is using same lighting algorithm, for example, the same rendering, so we get that like straight into the game.
The same sort of loading of tiles and
yeah.
But the destructibility of the environments here is different than Kāora.
Because it's complete. That's one of the big things with Kāora, is like completely rewritten how the terraforming work and the destructibles work and the physics work and so on and so forth. So it's completely different project in that aspect. But we borrow, like I said, for example, the rendering completely. Like we're using a lot of the same stuff that we have in Core Keeper already.
Wow, gotcha. Dude, Fredrik, thanks so much for showing this. This is so cool. And thanks for sharing your thoughts, man, on how all this works. It's just so impressive. A little bit jealous over here.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, dude. Well, thanks for your time. This was so good. This is going to be a great episode. Hey, is there anything you want me to leave in the description of this podcast? A link to Kāora or your socials or anything like that?
Oh, you can link to my socials on like X and Blue Sky, perhaps. Okay. I think that would be good. Otherwise, I think people can probably find the games themselves if they're interested, So that's
awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Big thanks. It was super fun.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Let me know if you want to do it again sometime.
I would love to. And maybe we can, I think Julian mentioned he wants to hop on and do the three of us. I think he mentioned that.
Yeah.
That would be a lot of fun. I definitely, one of my hesitations there is I would feel completely this big next to you two.
No, come on, man.
You guys are really, really smart. Cool, man. Well, thanks for your time. And good luck on Kāora. It's looking amazing. Also, don't forget to check out Bezi and their brand new feature, Agent Mode. It makes it very easy to create and modify code directly in your projects at your approval and provides tailor suggestions specifically to your project. It's completely free to get started, and you can do so by simply clicking the link in the description.